Namaste students. In this lesson control coordination, today you are going to see about spinal cord. Where do you see spinal cord? Yes, it is an extension of the brain. And this spinal cord is a tubular structure, muscular form, and this runs through the vertebral column. As you know that spinal cord is an extension of the brain, and this also serves a very important function here. Now, this spinal cord enters through the vertebral column and ends here, and it gives out lot of nerves which we call it as spinal nerves. Now let us see the function of spinal cord. Spinal cord forms a connecting link between the brain and the PNS. What do you mean by PNS? Peripheral nervous system. That in short we used to write as PNS. And the next function of spinal cord is it facilitates flexible movements. Since the spinal cord is the one which connects with all other parts of the body through the nerves, that is the peripheral nervous system, it helps in the flexible movement of the body. That is, all the voluntary actions are brought about mainly because of the spinal cord. Then, it communicates messages from the brain to the different parts of the body. Since it is a link between the brain and the other parts, it conveys the message to all parts of the body. Then, next is, it coordinates reflexes. This is a very important function of spinal cord. It brings about reflex action. Now let us see the different types of actions in our body. Here you see heartbeat. The next is the leg moving, and this is stomach. Inside the stomach, digestion is taking place, and you see the hands you are opening, and you can see the fingers opening and closing. Here you see the stomach, intestine. So all these are some of the actions that take place inside our body, and inside and outside our body. And here you see some of the actions are voluntary and some are involuntary. What do you mean by voluntary and involuntary? Voluntary means the actions which can control. For example, our leg movement and the hand movement we can control. But these actions like heartbeat and other digestion, etc., that we cannot control. Whenever the food is put inside your body, it keeps on digesting there. That we cannot stop. The same manner, heartbeat also we cannot stop at all because it is an involuntary action. So these three are involuntary action and these two are voluntary actions, right? So these two actions normally take place in our body. And apart from this, there is also another action which we call it as reflex action. This is an automatic, unconscious, immediate, involuntary action. And this action, why should it happen in our body? See, during emergency, this kind of action will take place in our body, and that is carried out by spinal cord. And for this, thinking is not needed at all. So there is no involvement of brain. Now this is a picture showing reflex action. This will help you to understand reflex action in a better way. Now here you see a hand touching a fire there. And you know the fire may burn the finger, isn't it? So whenever this heat is felt by the hand, immediately the receptors which are in the hand, they will sense it and send the message through the nerves. And this nerve will be carried to the spinal cord. From there it will be going to the brain. But before going, again there is another small nerve which we call it as relay nerve. That nerve connects the afferent nerve, and then this nerve is called as afferent nerve. And then from there it will get the information from the spinal cord, that is the decision, what has to be done and everything, and passes through the efferent nerve. So in this manner, the cycle or the circuit gets ended in a short span of time, and that is what we call it as reflex action. So what is the need for this reflex action? Actually, during emergency, that is here, since it is burning the finger, immediately it has to take the action. Only then there won't be damage in the hand. So in that case, if this nerve has to carry the impulses to the spinal cord and from there to the brain, means it may take a very long time. Of course, short span only, but even then the damage will be there. So it has to take much more faster. So in that case, what happens is this nerve which goes to the spinal cord will get the information from the spinal cord itself, and immediately the action will be done. And that is what we call as reflex action, that is quick action, and that is done or carried out by the spinal cord. So this is what we call as reflex action, and this occurs during emergency. So it happens without thinking, since it is not going to the brain immediately, and since the decision is taken by the spinal cord itself, this does not involve the brain. Then it is carried out by the spinal cord. That is what I told you. This action is carried out by spinal cord itself. So this is what we say as reflex action. So this kind of action we see in our body during emergency. Now these are the examples of reflex action. Now here the first one shows blinking when an object reaches your eye. Immediately if any object reaches your eye, what will you do? You will be closing your eye, isn't it? That quick action is nothing but reflex action. Here this also says the same thing. Closing eyes while seeing bright light. Even when bright light is focused on your eye, you feel like closing, isn't it? That action is done without the involvement of the brain, and so it is a reflex action. Now coughing also, sneezing, then salivation on seeing delicious food. Whenever any delicious food is kept before us, won't we feel like eating it? Saliva will be secreted in our tongue, and all that is because of reflex action. And feeling nausea on smelling spoiled food. So vomiting sensation, everything is all because of reflex action. Yes, some more examples are here on the board. You can see withdrawing the hand on touching fire and touching hot object is all reflex action. And some more examples like if knee jerks, means it is because when any hard substance is hit on the knee, immediately our knee will jerk, and that happens automatically without our knowledge, that is without the brain involvement. That is also reflex action. Then when it is pricked by a pin also, you feel the pain only after the action is done. So this is also a reflex action. Now let us see how this reflex action takes place and what is the pathway. This normally we call it as reflex arc. It's like a short circuit or short cycle which happens within our body. Here you can see a hand touching a hot object. Now the hot substance which is inside, that is a stimulus, and the receptors in the hand will feel the heat, and immediately it will send the message through the nerve. So the nerve, which is sensory nerve, it comes from here, that is from the sense organ, and from there it goes to the spinal cord. First it will reach the spinal cord. When it goes to the spinal cord, there the decision is taken by the spinal cord itself. This is the spinal cord. A section of a spinal cord picture is shown here. Actually it is a tubular structure, as I told you in the beginning. Inside it, this nerve, that is the afferent nerve, it will be entering, and then it will get the message from the spinal cord itself. Because this is an emergent, for this immediately it has to respond, because if the hand is there on the hot object for a long time, what will happen to the hand? It will get damaged, isn't it? So for that reason, spinal cord itself will take the decision, and with the help of the relay nerve, it will give the answer or what the body has to do, that message through the nerve, that is motor nerve. And that nerve is connected to the muscles. So this muscle immediately, as you have learnt in the earlier class, in the neuromuscular region, it will be transmitting the information impulses, and this will cause the muscle to make some special proteins that causes the contraction of the muscle. So same thing happens here also, and immediately the hand will be lifted up. It will be taking it away from the hot object. So this action actually happens very quickly than the normal way of taking the messages. So because it doesn't go to the brain, in between itself, that is in the spinal cord itself, it gets the information and comes back. So it's a quick action, and this we call it as reflex arc. Now let us see how the message is passed. From the receptor, that is from the hand, it passes to the sensory neuron, then it passes to the relay neuron in the spinal cord. From the relay neuron, it will move to the motor neuron, and from there to the effector. Effector is nothing but the muscle. So the muscle will immediately do the response. That is, it will be lifting it up from the hot object. So in the same manner, any reflex action happens means this kind of arc will be seen there. Now let us learn more about reflex arc. During emergency, when the action has to be carried out quickly, this reflex arc is formed. So wherever there is a necessity for a quick action, immediately reflex arc is formed. These are formed in the spinal cord itself by the nerve that it detects, that is by the sensory nerve, and then it moves to the motor nerve. Now let us see the difference between reflex action and walking. I told you reflex action is a quick action, and walking is a voluntary action. Voluntary action means which can be controlled by us. Now what is the difference between reflex action and walking? Even in reflex action, actually the muscles are involved there and they bring about movement. But the difference is here the reflex action, it is controlled by the spinal cord. The spinal cord itself will decide and bring about the movement. Whereas walking involves brain. The message goes to the brain and the brain will bring about the movement. So that is the main difference between reflex action and walking. So spinal cord is involved in reflex action, and here the brain is involved. And which part of the brain means it is cerebellum. Now next one is this reflex action happens in a quick span of time, whereas this walking will take some time for the body to react. Now let us see the difference between involuntary action and reflex action. Here the same thing we are going to see. In the case of reflex action, it is controlled by spinal cord, I told you. But in the case of involuntary action, that is controlled by the brain, but a different part of the brain, that is medulla. Now this is reflex action actually. It needs one external stimuli. External. See, every action in our body, there is a stimulus which is causing the response. But in the case of reflex action, the stimulus always comes from outside. So it is due to the external stimuli, and the reaction is much more faster than the normal response. Here, in the case of involuntary, this is due to internal stimuli. Then this takes place within a fraction of a second, and here as usual the speed of the response is slower. And the example is given here, pulling out our hand on touching a hot object, and this is heartbeat, which is an involuntary action. Now let us see the difference between thinking and reflex action. Here thinking means it involves lot of nerves and it is done by the brain, because you have learnt when you studied about the brain function that cerebrum plays a very important role in the thinking, logical thinking, everything, isn't it? So thinking involves brain and lot of nerves are needed for it. Interconnection of lot of nerves will bring lot of impulses, and with that it will be correlating and relating it, and finally it will be giving the information. So thinking is a process that is done by the brain, and this is a slow process because it has to first find out whether any memory is stored in the brain. With that it has to relate, so it takes some time. Whereas reflex action involves spinal cord and very few nerves. Here in the last picture you saw that the nerves like efferent, afferent and relay nerve, only 3 nerves we see there. Very few nerves will be involved. If it is a very short circuit, means that is in reflex action, of course it is a short cycle. So it involves only very few nerves, and this is a quick process. So from this we understand that thinking is a complicated process and reflex action is a simple quick process. Okay, now movement is nothing but the response, isn't it? This movement in our body may be a slow movement or a fast movement. If you want to make the movement faster, what you have to do? What should happen inside our body? The transfer of information should be faster, isn't it? The impulses should be transferred quickly. Of course, we have nerves there which can pass the impulses quickly. And how do they pass? It is by means of electrical impulse, isn't it? So this electrical means is an excellent method, but it has its own limitation. Now let us see why it is not an apt one for all transmission. Limitations of electrical impulse. Electrical impulse can pass only through nerves. So if the impulse has to be passed through electrical means, there must be nerves. Only through nerves it can pass in that manner. And in our body, all the cells are not connected by nerves. The cell takes time to reset its mechanism before it can generate and transmit. So whenever electrical impulse reaches another cell where the nerve is not there, then it has to change to chemical impulse. So for that it has to reset its mechanism, and it will take some time. So organism also have another way of conveying the message, and that is what we call as chemical means. About the chemical means you will be studying in the next module. Question time now. I hope you will answer quickly because you have studied about reflex action and your answers also must be quick, right? Reflex action is fast or slow? Reflex action is voluntary or involuntary? Reflex action is due to external stimulus or internal stimulus? Reflex action is carried out by brain or by the spinal cord? Yes? Shall we see the answers? It is fast, and reflex action is involuntary. It gets a stimulus from outside. And the last one, it is controlled by spinal cord. Did you get the answer? Now you are going to identify the parts of the reflex arc. The first part is the one which is touching the hot object. And the second one, what is it? It is a nerve which is carrying the stimulus from the receptor and taking it to the spinal cord. Now third one, this is also a nerve which is getting the information from this nerve and then passing it to the next nerve. Now the fourth portion, what is this part where the decision is taken? Now the fifth one is a nerve which brings back the answer or which brings back the response and brings about the movement. Are you able to find out? Let's see the answer. Now let us see the answers. These are the answers for your reference. Number 1 is a receptor. Number 2 is a nerve, that is afferent nerve. Then number 3 is relay neuron. And the fourth part is the part where the decision is taken, and that is spinal cord. And the fifth part is the efferent nerve. Did you check the answer? Were they all correct? I hope it is correct. Namaste.